This is the beginning of something, not the end.
I don't know, but it's not because I don't care. I don't know because you're not supposed to know. Or you can't go on with your life.
So, Mad Men, Time and Life. This is the midpoint of the final half of this season. Why can't it just be two 7-episode seasons? Season 7, 7 episodes. Season 8, 7 episodes. That would make a lot more sense to me. I like that a lot better. But AMC has chosen to call it the final season, split it in two. No problem. If that's what they're going with, I'm on board. The issue that I have is with them saying 2 more episodes left until the season finale, the series finale. Just stop. Stop. There's 3 episodes left. There's 7 total. We've seen 3 of them. We've seen 4 of them. That leaves 3 left. 3 left. There's 2 episodes left until the series finale. Stop. I don't like it. Time and Life. I've done quite a bit of research on this episode. It demanded a lot of research, so I hope, sit down, get yourself a tasty drink, frosty cold beverage, and let's talk about this together. So, it's very appropriate with Don to plead with his staff like this. No, listen, this is not the end. This is the beginning. He's pleading with his staff and by proxy the audience, because the fact of the matter is we know this is the end. This is the end of Mad Men. There's only 3 more episodes left, 3 more weeks, and we will know where the story ends. It's actually making me a little bit emotional because we've been following these characters since 2007. If I'm doing my math correctly, 8 years. It's a long time. It's a lot we have invested in these people. So the name Time and Life, it refers to 2 things. First of all, the building they work in. It's the Time and Life building. A lot of people call it the Time Life building, but it's the Time and Life building, referring, of course, to the 2 magazines, Time and Life. And it's on 1271 Avenue of the Americas, New York City, Standard. And the sign out front actually does say Time and Life. These are also 2 of the themes of the show that we're dealing with. Time, we only have 3 hours left of new content. And life. The life not lived, is this all there is? These are the themes we've been dealing with. After Lane Price fired the partners and they were able to steal away to a hotel to begin Sterling Cooper Draper Price and avoid the sale by Putnam Powell and Lowe of Sterling Cooper to McCann Erickson. You remember that one? So then Sterling Cooper Draper Price took up residence on a single floor, I believe it was the 37th floor of the Time and Life building. Okay? So it opened actually in 1959, which was a year before the series began. The series began, if memory serves, in March of 1960. So that's right after the Time and Life building opened. Time and Life actually occupied, I want to say, like 23 floors of the building, which was quite a chunk out of 37. And if I'm not mistaken, recently I found that the Time Inc. they're actually vacating. They're not going to continue with their lease. So, end of an era there as well. So let's start off talking about Peggy and Pete. Just like when Pete tipped Dawn off about the PP&L merger, Pete is going to let Peggy know the meat of this episode. The fact of the matter is that McCann Erickson only ever wanted the executive staff. They've passed the test that Hobart left out for them. And it's time to shut the doors. The name Sterling Cooper will no longer exist. We're going to get into that in much more detail. But Pete and Peggy, they have a history going all the way back to season 1, naturally. They're 2 of our major characters. And Pete, just like when he let Dawn know that Duck Phillips was going to be president of the new Sterling Cooper under PP&L, Pete's letting Peggy know, through just loyalty and maybe some lingering feelings he has for her, that McCann Erickson is going to take over and she has the opportunity to maybe find somewhere else to go, jump ship quickly, or she can accept her role in the giant machine that is McCann Erickson, which is a real advertising agency in New York. A lot of people don't know that. So They actually had a response to the letter that Dawn wrote. You can look that up on your own. So Peggy looks very natural with the little girl, doesn't she? With the little girl kind of hugging her, and she's looking over her shoulder at Pete. Is this not perhaps a nice proxy of the family that they had but chose not to have? She looks so natural, and I think I want to say the three of them, but Pete and Peggy and the little boy, who must be about 10 at this point, they look very good together. And I think she looks very natural in that role as a mother. Something that we're going to get into in more detail when she meets the stage mother later on. They're auditioning for a new ad, and they need to have a child actor. So they're auditioning, and it really brings out some of this maternal instinct, some of this mommy lion that Peggy has. So when she goes full on mommy lion on the stage mother, it's definitely 10 years of repressed guilt coming out. I believe she's Catholic, this Catholic guilt coming out. And it really makes me think about Peggy and Stan as well, because it's Stan who she opens up to, and Stan pulls it out of her. She lets Stan realize that something is wrong, and Stan's able to ask just the right questions. And for the first time in, I want to say 6 seasons, Peggy actually opens up about this. Since she talked to Don about it, and he said it will amaze you how quickly you can move on. She actually lets Stan know what happened, and she says it's not that she doesn't care. It's because you're not supposed to know, or else you can't move on with your life. We can assume that this 9-10-year-old boy is with a good family, that he's happy and he's being raised healthy and properly, and that's the best that Peggy can hope for. And she chose her career over being a very young unwed mother, which 1960, 1961 was a decision that was, I want to say, easier, because it was society almost made it for you in those days. I mean, it was a real stigma in the late 50s, early 60s to be an unwed mother. And this is something that, without getting too deep into it, is actually part of my family as well. I have a personal story about someone in my family who went through this during the same time period, very similar. And it's just the way things were handled. So, Stan never really connected with me as a character. Or I should say I never really connected with him. And recently, though, I've really begun to enjoy him. And he's more than just an amazing beard. I mean, I wish I could grow a beard like Stan Rizzo, but I can't. But he is really there for Peggy. And even later on in the episode, when he calls her with a question, she says, "Would you just stay on the phone with me?" And I don't know if the attraction is romantic. I can't quite figure that out. Part of me wishes that the two of them will end up together at the end of the show. And part of me just thinks that it's just a really good friend for Peggy to have. And he's the friend that she needs right now. I mean, we know that he's attracted to her, but I don't know if it's reciprocal. So he's able to really figure out what's bothering Peggy, and I definitely respect that. And it was good to hear her finally acknowledge after so long what's been bothering her, and to acknowledge her son, even if Pete won't. So she owes her entire career to that decision that she made, and it's a decision that she can't look back on and second guess herself. She's got to accept it, that this is her moving forward, and the life she could have had with that little boy, maybe with Pete, maybe without Pete, but that is obviously Peggy's life not lived. The life lived for Peggy is her choosing to become a career woman, top in her field, potential future creative director. If not at McCann, then it's somewhere else, BBDO. I don't know. So, Stan's suggestion that Peggy hates kids really sets her off, and it really hits a nerve, and he doesn't know how deep until she opens up and tells him about it. And shouldn't she be able to make the same decision that a man would make and not have this decision affect everything and who she is moving forward? You're not supposed to know, or else you can't go on with your life. Very interesting. Her headhunter later lets her know that her opportunity at McCann Erickson is actually the only one she has. It's the best one. It's the biggest advertising agency. Yes, she'll be a cog in a giant machine, but what a machine it is. What she can do for her book, for her portfolio. She's going to be working on accounts like Coca-Cola with Dawn. It's really an opportunity she can't pass up. Pete and Trudy, they're really quite a match set, aren't they? I was really hoping that this season would give us a real Pete-centric episode, because I love Pete, and I do like Trudy. I mean, who doesn't like Allison Brie? She's adorable. But the two of them are very much alike. They're the old money, sort of waspy kind of privilege that I really feel like the confrontation with the principal superintendent at the private school really brought to the forefront, because we're talking about a feud that goes back to the 1600s between the McDonalds and the Campbells. And I looked into this. I'll get into it in a second. But it's really Pete and Trudy. They really are a wonderful couple together, and it's a shame that Pete had to have that, tryst with Rory Gilmore there. That was just him being really misguided, and I feel like he fell into the same sort of hubris that Lane Price did. And Mrs. Price, the widow Price, really threw in Dawn's face that she made a man like that, gave him the sort of ego that would make him think he could keep up with someone like Dawn or someone like Roger, but he can't. And Pete does hold his own with them, but I think he's much better suited to that sort of home life, even though he resisted it, in the suburbs with his, beautiful society wife hosting sort of society events for his privileged, snobby friends. Something that they could get behind. But they're trying to get poor Trudy into this private school, and it seems like there's different reasons. She didn't draw the right kind of picture. Who's the man with the mustache, by the way? And she didn't pass her tests. And Trudy didn't apply to any of their schools, which showed arrogance. And at the end of the day, it comes down to a feud that his clan had with the Campbells. And it turns out that it is the Massacre of Glencoe. I looked this up, and I just typed in Campbell and MacDonald feud, and here it is. On early morning of February the 12th, 1692, 38 members of the clan MacDonald were slaughtered by Robert Campbell of Glenlyon and his men, who had accepted the hospitality of Clan MacDonald. So basically, Pete Campbell's ancestor is Roose Bolton, and this superintendent MacDonald, his ancestor was Robb Stark. If you'll forgive the parallel, but that's basically what we're talking about, because the laws of hospitality is not something that George R.R. Martin invented. It's actually called murder under trust. And it was considered a much more heinous crime than murder on itself. It's murder under trust. This is someone you've invited into your home, invited into your lands, extended basically hospitality to them, and they've stabbed you in the back. So Pete and Trudy have a nice talk later on back at the house, and the line of the night, because of course Pete punched the superintendent in the face, deserved it, I think. And Trudy sort of talking about how these other husbands are always coming on to her, and he's saying, who? And Trudy says, Peter, you can't punch everyone. And just that is really funny to me, thinking about Pete Campbell trying to punch the whole world. He can solve everything with a punch. The bit of irony wasn't lost on me either, that in an episode directed, by the way, by Jared Harris, my own favorite Lane Price, that there would be a fist fight with Pete Campbell. Of course, he lost to Lane in their famous fist fight back in season, I think it was 4. But in this case, Pete won. Now, was it a sucker punch? He said it was coming. He warned the guy. So, poor Joni. Well, I don't know poor Joni, but her suitor, the millionaire in California, is all too eager to take the red eye out to New York and be there just to comfort her, just because he thinks she might need a shoulder to cry on or just a friendly ear. He's ready to take the red eye out there just to be with her. So maybe this is a man who deserves Joni. We don't see Kevin in this episode. We don't know that necessarily he's met Kevin. And if you'll forgive me while we're on the topic of Kevin, we'll get to this later, but when Dawn and Roger are at the bar, Roger's waxing philosophical about how he's the last of the Sterling name. I mean, you do have a son with Joan, Kevin. He is a Sterling man, if you will. So it's strange that he didn't even think of Kevin, but yet before he was almost begging Joan to let him in Kevin's life. So I don't know if he even wants to be a father figure to Kevin or not. So, if Joan is out of a job, which, again, I'm sorry to keep saying this, but we will get into that later, she still has her money and perhaps a handsome gentleman who actually accepts who she is and is deserving of her. So we hope that for Joan, because she does deserve a happy ending here. Not everyone on this show does, but Joni definitely does. It could be the man that she told Bob Benson she was waiting for. Of course, you remember that scene. She said it's worth waiting. She would rather die waiting for love than to give in to some kind of a compromise. And here she is hopefully finding the happy ending that she deserves. So the news, the big news, it starts out with what Comcast actually, like in the little blurb that I read about the episode, it says, Joan helps Roger fix a clerical error. In reality, the clerical error was that McCann Erickson canceled their lease in the Time Life building. They have 2 floors, 37 and 38, as far as I know. And they canceled it because they don't want the overhead of that office and all those people anymore. There's so many redundant people. And even though Sterling Cooper can offer them a wealth in accounts and conflicts like Minute Maid, Dow Chemical, I believe, and Burger Chef, among others, they're not interested in that. They just want the executive talent. They want Don Draper, they want Pete Campbell, and I think that's about it. I mean, Roger Sterling. Well, let's go through the plot first. So, the resigned look on Don's face when Roger tells him the news was really telling. It was just really just resigned and accepting his fate, which I really feel like spoke volumes about where Don is right now. He's just disappointed. He's not, hurt. He's not betrayed. He's just disappointed. And that's really not a good thing to be. He never wanted to work for McCann. All the way back in season 1, Hobart was coming for him. And he saw how Hobart does business. He brought Betty's hopes up. He got her hopes up and made her think that she could be the model for Coca-Cola. And once Don turned down the offer, they cut Betty loose, and they were saying they wanted more of a Jackie O, less of a Grace Kelly. That was an episode, I think it was 9, Shoot, the one I keep talking about. It's a great episode. And he lets her down, so he basically crushes this woman's dreams. Poor Betty, oh Betty. Just to make a point to Don. And now finally Hobart has his prize. So, Don was always a big fish in a small pond, but now he's going to be, I guess, a medium fish in the biggest pond there is. And I don't think that's what Don wants. So Lou Avery finally calls up, and he tells him that he sold Scout's Honor to the Japanese. They're going to make, I guess, some sort of a web series. They're going to make some sort of a cartoon out of it. And he tells him to enjoy the rest of his miserable life. Now, how true is Lou Avery going to be here? Lou Avery and Jim Cutler, 2 of the most despicable people on this show, I think are the only 2 that are, at this point, look like they got a happy ending. So Lou quits, but he gives Don the kernel of an idea that it could be Sterling Cooper West that saves their brand and that saves the lifestyle they want, not their jobs. Their jobs are safe, but they're trying to save the agency yet again. So Don cooks up an 11th hour plan to get a certain number of people on board to prove to Jim Hobart that Sterling Cooper is worth keeping as a name, not just the talent, but as a name. And they're going to run it all out of Sterling Cooper West. So they're looking for these, what they call conflicts. So it's actually Lou that gives Don this great idea. And it reminds me of every episode of House, where House gets an idea at the last minute, very much near the end of the episode, and he solves the issue. He solves the case in a very oblique way. And Don has that kind of moment of realization where he's just like, Sterling Cooper West, California. He's talking to Ted Shaw about it. And California doesn't mean anything to Ted, but it means everything to Don. We know the memories he had there with Anna Draper. He knows the baptism he had when he swam in the Pacific Ocean at the end of in the Hall of the Mountain King, or just the Mountain King. And it means everything to Don. And he would love to go out there. So they prepare a pitch where they're able to actually try to convince, they get there early and they're going to try to convince Jim Hobart that this is the way forward. They're going to paint a picture. And Don stands up, and we're about to get that carousel moment that anyone who's been watching my channel knows I have been waiting for since this half season began. And Jim tells him, Don, just stop. And there's Don with all his slides, and he says, picture it, California. And Jim says, Don, the decision's been made. And there's nothing Don can do. He's powerless. His carousel moment, his pitch, all his skills, he doesn't want to hear it. Jim doesn't want to hear it. It was really, really sad to see Don Draper, of all people, basically told to sit down. Even though they were able to line up what they could at the 11th hour, And Pete comes in with Secor laxatives once again, which was an account of the original Sterling Cooper advertising agency since 1946. But Hobart is not interested. He's made up his mind seemingly months ago. And it was going to seem like they were going to save the day again, just like they did when they had Lane Price fire them and start as CDP, just like they did at the end of season 6, where Roger outmaneuvered Jim Cutler and was able to save the agency again and save Don's job. It turns out that it wasn't what they thought. It was just a test by McCann, because all they want is the executive talent. It's basically was their way of stealing Don, I assume Peggy, Pete Campbell, maybe Roger, but probably not, and not Joan. She's not even on the list. So that's all they wanted. What was the talent? They didn't want all the baggage, the overhead that came with Sterling Cooper and Partners, a division of McCann Erickson. So unfortunately, Jim Cutler wins. He got all the money with none of the McCann BS. Roger becomes a redundant administrator. Joan's just another office manager. I mean, she wants to be an account person, pretend like she's a real partner, but she never was, unfortunately. Pete might have a job. He's very, very good at what he does. He brought in Secor Laxative again at the last second. It was a master stroke. You might remember that it was Secor Laxative was one of the only companies to follow them when they became SCDP, and they abandoned Sterling Cooper. Secor Laxative actually has a lot of importance in the storyline. So Jim Hobart really wants them to believe that their best work is still ahead of them. But Don knows the truth, and so do we. It's probably not. And as they leave the room after this dumbfounded look on their faces, they go to the bar to celebrate, not with champagne like Hobart suggested, but with just some simple mugs of beer. And it's not too often on this show you see these characters drink beer. Usually, Roger has his vodka, perfectly Stoli, and Don has his Canadian Club. But in this instance, they're drinking beer. And it's a farewell not only for the partners in universe, but it's also clearly a farewell to the actors as well, because how many more scenes are these 5 going to have actually together in the same room? Time will tell, but the precious hours we have with these characters that we've grown to care for is very limited. It's very precious at this point. So it really is a goodbye, because think about it too. Once they get to McCann, they're not going to all be on the same, in the same area. That's a huge company. They're going to be doing their own things. Joan and Roger are probably going to be redundant, as I said before, and it's very unlikely that Pete and Don will be on the same accounts working together. So it's the end for these characters, and of course these actors, they'll probably never all work. I mean, I can say with some certainty they'll never work together on the same thing again. All of them together like this. If we're lucky, we'll get a couple of them. They might do a movie together or a guest stint on a show somewhere. But this really is the end for this very talented cast. They've really come a long way. They've come into their own, and they've changed. Without forgive me for the hyperbole, but they've changed the face of television of drama. This is the kind of drama that only comes along, I want to say, once in a generation. I mean, there's been other shows, Sopranos, Breaking Bad, but Mad Men really is the type of show that you don't get every fall season when the networks debut their new shows. You don't get this every time. So we're fortunate to have seen it. I really feel that. So as they say goodbye, everyone's got some place to be. Of course, Joan has to go see her son, and of course she's meeting up with her new beau at some point, Richard. And Ted Shaw is going to be meeting up with his high school sweetheart, who he's recently reconnected with, so he has somewhere to be. Pete is going to be talking to Trudy a little bit more about Tammy. I'd love to see those two get back together, but don't think it's going to happen. And finally, Roger, of course, is going to meet up with Marie Calvé, of all people. So that is apparently a thing. They are going with that storyline. So it's going to be Roger and Marie. Who's the only person who doesn't have somewhere to be? It's Don. So he finishes up at the bar, and he slinks away to Diana's apartment. which is vacant. She left everything behind. She left her furniture, and now there's a gay couple living there one of them seems very eager to invite Dawn in, but he doesn't go for it. It also is a sign of the times as well. I mean, in 1959, you probably wouldn't have, generally speaking, a gay couple, being this open about their lifestyle with a stranger who might knock on their door. But now it's 1970, and it's absolutely a different world. And the way society has grown, it's already showing. I mean, even today in 2015, we're still working on this. But you can see just how far that they've come. I would love to see what Sal Romano was up to. He was one of my favorite characters, and I thought that they cut him too soon. He didn't make the jump, obviously to SCDP, but it was Lee Garner Jr., I believe, who wanted him fired because Sal had no interest in him. He was, homosexual as well. The client for Lucky Strike. But we're off topic. I'd love it if Sal could make a cameo, but there's only 3 episodes left, and I'm not sure if it would be relevant to the story. We only have 3 more episodes, so I don't know if that's specifically important enough to include. So, I mean, I've experienced mergers and buyouts as well. I worked actually myself for an ad agency for a time, and I was a producer there and later more of a project manager. And when another company buys you, they're going to look for redundancies. And I was fortunate enough to survive a few buyouts, but then there's, you always get to the one that you don't survive. And there was one where it was, we had a staff of about 20, and they cut it down to the CEO, me, and 1 sales guy. And I know what it's like to talk to your friends who didn't make the cut, and you definitely feel a sense of guilt that you were a survivor. And I also know the other side, to talk to people who did make the cut when you didn't. And there can be some hurt and some anger and some resentment there as well. So I know what some of these characters are going through. So later on, when they get back to the office and Don's making his big speech, and he's saying, well, first Roger's saying, I didn't do this, and everyone's panicking because they know they're out of a job. Don says, no, listen. He says, this isn't the end. This is the beginning, and no one's buying it. A few seasons ago, everyone would be on the edge of their seats. When they were going for Jaguar, he said, get ready to take a giant leap forward. And everyone's on the edge of their seats. What is Don Draper going to say? But now, the partners are no longer the bosses. They know that McCann Erickson is the boss now, and they've just become employees like them. Roger, Joan, Pete, Ted, and Don are all just rank and file employees, just like the rest of them are. So why should they listen? They've got to get their resumes polished up and hope that they make the cut, and if not, they've got to have their next move planned. Peggy and Stan are thinking about their next move, and Peggy, in the end, I think wisely decides she's going to go to McCann. She can do some great work there. She can really make an impact, being a leading woman in her profession. Could she make creative director at McCann? I don't know, but if not at McCann, then to the next place she works. So everyone there has some real thinking to do, getting those resumes polished. These events, they were set in motion a really long time ago, and our characters today are just kind of powerless to stop it, just like Pete and, even Tammy being at the mercy of some feud that happened almost 300 years ago. We have the McCann deal that Roger triumphantly moved forward at the end of the first half of season 7. It wasn't all that they thought it was. And this was basically Sterling Cooper's death sentence that was signed a very long time ago. There's nothing our characters can do about it. Don's showmanship and his pitch, no one wants to hear it. All of Pete's maneuverings and even Ken Cosgrove thinking that he's stopping it by not giving them the business. In the end, none of it mattered. None of it added up to anything because Hobart got what he wanted. He got the executives, he got the talent he wanted, but he doesn't want the Sterling Cooper name. Roger, ever since Lucky Strike, has had a difficult time making himself relevant, and I don't think this is going to help at all. I know he was on Pond's Cold Cream for a while, as I remember, but he is going to have a very difficult time at McCann. He didn't really do much at Sterling Cooper. I hate to say it, as much as I love the character, it was like Bert Cooper. I mean, he didn't do anything. He wasn't closing any new business besides being, saying very sage things and looking, great with a pair of Argyle socks. He didn't do much. And, you might remember when they moved to the Time and Life building originally, he didn't even have an office for the longest time because he himself was redundant in his own company. So at McCann, some of these people don't stand a chance. I want to end on something that Anna Draper said. We spoke about California and what it means to Dawn. So Anna says, it means the only thing keeping you from being happy is the belief that you're alone. And Dawn says, what if that's true? And she says, then you can change. To which Dawn replies, people don't change. And that's been a theme that we've been dealing with. That's been something that Dawn has been struggling with. Can he change? Can he reinvent himself? Is he going to just go to McCann and work out the rest of his career? He promised Roger a long time ago, and we've talked about this, that if he leaves Sterling Cooper, it will not be for more advertising. Now, this McCann merger, it could be a loophole that allows him to work for McCann, but I don't think that's Dawn's story. I think it ends with, maybe he doesn't go full hobo, the hobo code, but I think Dawn's going to reinvent himself. He doesn't have his apartment tying him down. He doesn't have a wife anymore. Sally's gone. He has no relationship with Bobby or Jean. Betty doesn't need him. Now his own company is gone. McCann doesn't really need him, and he doesn't want to give Hobart the satisfaction of sitting in a cubicle somewhere reviewing, guys right out of college, and girls reviewing their work. He doesn't want to give him the satisfaction. So my guess is that he doesn't go for it, that he tries to reinvent himself again. The only thing Dawn hasn't lost, think about it, he's lost his family, he's lost his career and his company at this point. The company that he saved and started, that's gone, he's lost. He's lost his apartment and his furniture. The only thing that Don Draper hasn't lost is his name. And it's a name that he stole. That's all he has left is a stolen identity. Even his reputation isn't worth what it once was. He can't command a room like he used to. He's not coming up with carousel ideas like he used to. So he needs to really confront this new reality that he's living with and this new identity that he's been handed, that he's evolved into. So can he change? Or does he have to start over again? We're going to get the answer in the next 3 weeks. So next week is Lost Horizon. I'm very curious as to what they do with that title. It's very evocative. And after that, only 3 episodes, no, including that, only 3 episodes left, not 2. Thank you very much, AMC, for being so confusing about it. That being said, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.